I call the January 2018 board meeting of the Hudson River Black River Regulating District to order. Roll call, Mr. Farrar.
Mr. Chairman, Mark Finkel.
Here.
Albert Hayes.
Here.
David Bergstresser. Here. Anthony Netto is excused. Jeffrey Rosenthal, excused. Kenneth DeWitt.
Here.
Robert Smolin.
Here.
Robert Leslie.
Here.
Robert Fultan.
Present.
John Hudson.
Here.
Stephanie Rozicki.
Here.
Richard Farrar. Here. Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Note, is Jeffrey with us by phone?
Not yet.
Not yet, okay. First thing I want to do is recognize that we have a staff member whose last day of working with us is today, Cheryl Zaquish, and I want to thank her, Zaquish, for all her years of service to the board, and thank you for everything you've done, and best of luck. And welcome, Aaron. Aaron is going to be with us every board meeting now, and taking Cheryl's place. So, welcome and good luck. We need a motion to adapt or revise the meeting agenda. We have to do an executive session, revise to do an executive session for personnel matter. Motion to accept the revised.
Also, we're going to do the budget development schedule.
I'll get to that in my...
So you'll just add it to your report?
Yes.
Got it.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Motion to accept the revised meeting agenda.
Yeah, I'll make that motion.
Mr. Hayes?
I'll second.
Mr. DeWitt?
All in favor?
Aye.
Introduction of guests. I don't have okay. And we move to public comment period. Is this the time? Or do we have that on the?
We actually have an item after the approval of the minutes.
Okay. Here it is an item. Okay. Approval of the December 12th, 2017 regular board meeting. We all have. Any additions or corrections? Okay. Motion to accept.
Motion to accept.
Mr. DeWitt?
Second? I'll second that.
Mr. Hayes?
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Perimeter field. If I could look down the agenda, I would have seen it here. We're on item number 5, and you are, I'm sorry, I didn't get your Ed Decker. Ed Decker is going to represent the permit holder.
Ed Decker is the permit holder.
He is the permit holder.
Oh, he is? Okay.
He does.
Yes, sir.
Do you want to make a statement, or do you want me to make a
Hi,
statement?
Chairman. Well,
Hello, how are you?
very well, Chair. Happy New Year.
Same to you.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
So Mr. Rosenthal has joined us via phone as a non-voting member,
yes.
non-participating member of the board.
Yes.
Chairman Finkel, if I might, Mr. Decker has piece of property up on the northern end of Sacandaga. Pursuant to a field inspection, staff recognized that he had constructed a dock and walkway out to that, well, a deck and walkway out to that deck. This past summer, they noticed it. They took some exception to that, and there's been some back and forth with some documents, some meetings, some phone calls, and as a result, there's been a determination by Mr. Hodgkin to require the removal of that deck because of the size of the deck exceeding the configurations previously approved by the board, and Mr. Decker has objected to that determination. Before you Each of you have a packet which includes a November 20th letter setting basically today's date, a November 17th letter, or a letter that we received on the 17th, which basically lays out Mr. Decker's appeal, and an October 3rd letter with a number of attachments which basically articulate our case. The long and short of it is that there is a disagreement between Mr. Hodgkin and Mr. Decker as to what was approved and what was not approved. I think that the October 3rd letter and exhibit lay that out pretty well. Each of you have had this for a couple of months. Hopefully you've had a chance to look it over. The photos are probably most illustrative, I guess is the word I'm looking for. And those, let's see, I think it's exhibit 11, basically shows what we're talking about at this point. If you look, you can see the walkway down to a deck. The deck is, at this point, three-tiered, and the second photo there, which you can see if you look over here, is a three-tiered deck with some deck chairs on the top of the deck. Mr. Decker purports to call those a walkway, leading a 4-foot walkway one way, 4-foot walkway back the other way, with a final 4-foot walkway at the bottom. I think Mr. Hodgkin characterizes it as a 23 by 12 deck with a couple of pieces on top of it. The question is whether that deck has to go away or whether the board is willing to acquiesce to Mr. Decker keeping that deck in its current configuration. Before we turn it over to Mr. Decker, does the board have any question as to what we're talking about from our perspective?
No. I was out there, and we're out there.
Okay.
Anybody?
I think the simplest thing at this point is to give Mr. Decker the floor and give him an opportunity to state his piece, and then we can engage in a discussion after that, and we can pick apart our argument, and he can work at that too.
I just wanted to start by introducing myself and giving you a little bit of background. My name is Ed Decker. I grew up down the road in Lake Luzerne, New York. Pretty humble beginnings. Worked my way through university, working 40 hours a week, and have been fortunate enough to forge a very successful career in international business over the last 25 years. That career has allowed me to have a second home on Great Sacandaga Lake. I absolutely love this part of the country, love this part of the state. Make it my permanent home as well as an area to recreate with my family. I consider myself to be as much a steward of the environment as possible, in keeping with keeping things green, keeping things environmentally friendly, trying to prevent the property from degrading in its current state. The main purpose for when I first started constructing any of this was I have an elderly dad who enjoys coming to visit and getting down to the lake. At first, I had put in there were some placed stone stairs going down to the lake. I threw some mortar on top of them, basically let it rain to firm them up so Dad could have an easier time getting down to the lake. I planted a couple of trees, I had some dock boxes, and that was the first time that, Hudson River, Black River came to me and said, hey, you're in non-compliance with our regulations, we need you to make some changes. You need to jackhammer all the mortar and stone out, that's not allowed. You need to remove electrical planted 2 non-indigenous trees. Those can't be there. They were arborvitae, and then what it came down to is you really need to get permission before you plant the arborvitae trees. So I was told that things were not in compliance, and Mr. Hudson and I had a conversation. At one point, one of the inspectors threw some workers that I had working down at the lake off the property, saying, "Hey, you don't have a permit. You can't be here." They were moving stones to try to prevent erosion on the waterfront down there. And I said, "I do have a permit," but I didn't have a chance to say that because they were throwing off the job. I had to pay them for the rest of the day, but, you know, it was never checked that I had a permit in place to do that. So Mr. Hodges and I had a conversation, and like I said, I have a very busy international travel schedule. I'm out of the country as much as I'm in the country, and I said I needed a couple of months to come up with, you know, what I could do to try to remedy the situation. This was the drawing which is in your packet that I submitted to Mr. Hodges as to what the remedy was going to be. I said, okay, I have a, in quotes, platform that does not meet the needs or specifications of the board. If I modify the platform as per my drawing to be 3 parallel sections of boardwalk, because from what I understand, you're allowed an unlimited amount linear feet of 4 foot wide, no wider boardwalk to access the lake. And so when I presented this, I showed, you know, stairs going down to 3 parallel sections of boardwalk supported by 1 common structure. There's nothing in the statute that I could find anywhere in Hudson River, Black River documentation that says anything about what the underlying structure has to be, whether it could be 1 solid structure or multiple structures supporting the pieces of boardwalk. And so Mr. Hudson actually got there, did his visual inspection and said, no, that doesn't meet code, you need to remove it. I relied on the verbal approval from Mr. Hodgson to go ahead and make the modifications to the existing structure to make the 3 parallel sections of boardwalk to access the lake, which upon actual inspection with Mr. DeWitt was found to be non-compliant still. So I relied on an initial verbal approval to make the changes to the structure. It is my goal to modify the structure in a way that is acceptable to the board. I'm not trying to be a rule breaker. I'm trying to get Dad, who's now wheelchair bound, through, you know, ADA compliance down to the lakeside. You know, and I took a look at maybe I need to add some ramps now that go from the parallel sections of boardwalk to ramp it down to the end where our floating dock boardwalk would, you know, hook onto there. And I had questions about where I could not find anything on a single structure supporting multiple parallel sections of boardwalk. Would it change the board's mind if the sections of boardwalk were separated by 6 to 8 inches of space so that they are not, you know, a single structure with a boardwalk placed on top of them stepping down to the lake? Would that change the board's mind at all if there were open spaces between those parallel sections of boardwalk? That was one of the first questions I had.
Can I just clarify
Yes,
something?
sir.
What you're talking about right now is basically what I would call a 3-tiered dock. Is this what you're calling a boardwalk right now?
No, as per my drawings that I submitted and got my verbal approval on, it is a section of boardwalk that steps down, another section of boardwalk that steps down, final section of boardwalk that goes out onto my floating dock gangway.
Okay. All right, go ahead. Sorry.
And that was, you know, that was deemed to be unacceptable, and I understand that, and you know, okay, that's unacceptable. And I wanted to work with the board today to figure out what modifications would be acceptable to the board so that, you know, I can get that down to the beach in a safe fashion and that everybody is okay. I know I've got one neighbor who's unhappy who calls regularly and complains that, you know, basically had the admittance of that within the neighborhood, but, you know, we can't make everybody happy all the time. But obviously I have to comply by what the board says, and I'm asking, you know, if the parallel sections of boardwalk were separated by open space, would that make a difference?
So
I'm not following. I'm not following you right now. But space where?
between the parallel sections of boardwalk, if that was open space down to the ground versus having a solid structure and the three parallel sections are placed on.
Well, let's step back a little and look at, there's the initial May 12th work permit application, which results in some back and forth. Eventually, we come to a May 22nd conversation between Mr. Hodgkin and Mr. Decker, and a revised work permit application is submitted on May 30th. That revised application basically is the same application that was submitted May 12th, but now says, per a second discussion with Mr. Hodgkin on May 22nd, approve to modify the existing platform to attach drawings to meet code. What he's talking about are the drawings, which you'll find in your packet, which are basically handwritten drawings, which show the existing platform with two new steps on it and show them as walkways. Over, down, back out. And so the question posed initially was, was there a meeting of the minds on May 22nd with regard to those plans and the discussion that Mr. Hodgkin and Mr. Decker had. Follow up to that submission on May 30th, there was a June 7th letter from our office which said no, this is not what we had in mind. This is not appropriate. And so even if there was reliance by Mr. Decker on a verbal approval from Mr. Hodgkin, that reliance should have been clearly negated by the June 7th letter, which made clear that that's not what we had in mind.
Mr. Leslie?
Yes.
Mr. Leslie and gentlemen, can you hear me?
Yes.
You can.
Isn't it a little more simple? I don't mean to brush off Mr. Decker's effort now to resolve it, but isn't the issue before the board whether the existing structure is within or not within the permit and or what's authorized under the regulations? If that issue is decided and Mr. Hudson and staff can thereafter resolve through Mr. Becker's effort the violations of the rule, then it resolves the thing. But I don't think it's our place or the board's place now to override staff's effort to work with the permittee. The only issue before the board is whether his structure does or does not comply, and that's what's on appeal. Thereafter, whatever Mr. Decker does is up to him with regard to the regulating district staff. Just thought I would toss that out.
It's our contention that what is there now does not comply, and that there was never a meeting of the minds as to what would be approved, certainly not what was built. As a result, it's our recommendation that the access permit not be renewed, with the expectation that the non-conforming platform with the two additional structures on top of it be removed. At that time, once that's removed, he can apply for his permit again and get a work permit and build a conforming structure.
What do you call the two non-conforming structures on it? The two tiers?
Yes.
Okay.
Those were added to bring it into compliance. That's the conversation into my drawings.
Right.
Those were added additional cost and effort on my part to come into compliance with the board.
Right, and I believe that's where the disconnect comes.
That's the road.
Right.
You know, and I asked our staff here, I mean, is there a way to bring that into compliance? You know, without.
We allow an 8x8 viewing platform, and that's as large as it can be, is 8x8 viewing platform.
Okay.
Yep.
And I guess where there's a difference of viewpoints is I'm saying I've created parallel sections of boardwalk supported by a single supporting structure. And as I mentioned, I've done massive amounts of research. If you have anything that you've written in your statutes that prohibit a single supporting structure from supporting multiple parallel sections of boardwalk?
Whether it's a 15 by 15 deck with a huge gazebo on top of it, or a 15 by 15 deck with 2 tiers on top of it, it's still a 15 by 15 deck. In this case, 23 by 12?
11.
23 by 11?
And that's where I was asking, if it's altered to make space between the parallel sections of boardwalk that go all the way down to the ground, does that change the characteristic? And, you know, there's people who have zigzagging sections of boardwalk with a single support structure that come all the way down a 70-degree hill for 150 feet, 300 feet down to the lake. And that seems to be acceptable to the board, as well as Mr. Hudson's conversation and I about how there's no limit on the number of 4x4 landings you can have as you have your stairs going down to the lake. And there's no limit on the linear number of feet of boardwalk as long as it's no wider than 4 feet. So that's why I came up with this design to, in the best of my ability, meet the requirements of the board, as well as get that down to the lake safety. You know, those are the main things I was trying to accomplish. And I'm more than happy to modify the structure to meet the requirements of the board. I just kept running into, no, you need to completely remove 100% of everything that's there before we can have any other conversations. And I wanted to come in front of everybody as a gentleman and say, this is what I propose to do. I would like to figure out an amicable way for us to come to an agreement here.
John?
Just my point of view, and my conversation with Mr. Decker, he did describe to me about the 4-foot walkways. He amended the original work permit to come into code, in his words, in compliance. And the way I understood it, looking at this drawing, that these were going to be 4-foot wide, independent walkways on the ground as stated in the work permit. And my revisit out there, the original 11 by 23 foot platform was still there. I would never have allowed, and I'm sorry if you took it the wrong way.
And I apologize, sir. We should have had a face-to-face conversation instead of a phone call.
Right, exactly.
That's why I'm personally to.
So I apologize for that if you misunderstood what I was trying to get across to you, but they had to be 4 foot independently supported.
See, that I cannot find in the statute where it says you can't have a single supporting structure for multiple sections of boardwalk. Nowhere does it state that.
Well, what you're having there is you've got 11 foot by 23 foot platform.
Support structure. That's where we have a little disagreement on terms.
But the other thing, I mean,
I'm of the opinion that Jeffrey's right, that you gentlemen have had disagreements, and basically what's happening now is the board is being asked to say, are you in compliance with
Well, what I understand, there's 3 levels of appeal that are afforded to me as a person within the state.
Yeah.
And this is the first level of appeal.
Let's be completely clear in the process. This is an administrative proceeding between an access permit holder who has access to the lands of the people of the state of New York as administered by the Hudson River Black River Regulating District. The government delegates that authority to the board, and the board then has a staff that manages it for, in this case, the regulating district. This is also in context with the Department of Environmental Conservation, whom our actual fundamental law falls under, the Environmental Conservation Law, but also the Adirondack Park Agency, whom we've been working with for the past number of years and months to be able to streamline the permitting process for permit holders around the lake. And that process is reliant on us adhering to our own stated regulations that we have developed and that the board has authority to modify or adjudicate, sort of thing. So notwithstanding Mr. Decker's claim that it's not stated anywhere, it is explicitly stated that viewing platforms will be 8 by 8. And in this case, this 11 by 23 foot platform that we've asked Mr. Decker to remove, Mr. Decker has not followed the appeal process as stated in that's been given to his attorney, but instead, I'm almost done. And that what is done is in order to bring this before the board now, it's been delayed over a 9-month period. And instead of it being reviewed first by the chief engineer and then by myself as the executive director and having a conference where we would do it, he is elected through his attorney to bring it directly to the board. Subsequent to that, his permit application has come up for renewal on a yearly basis as stated in the contract that he has signed for numerous years, he and his wife. And to that point, I have not sent out the renewal letter and will not send out the renewal letter until the matter is cleared up to the board's satisfaction. Right. Subsequent to that, we are now here at a hearing which is very similar to the Okie and Gizzy hearing, where the options to the board are to require compliance. One tool to do that is to actually revoke the permit. So in a form and substance and process thing, we have gone from an initial conversation with the administrator and that first level of appeal, if you will, directly to the board at Mr. Decker's request, not at staff's.
With the acquiescence of staff.
We could not find anything that spelled out what the appeal process was. We looked up, down, and sideways. How do I appeal? What are the processes to do the appeal? And we were told we need to come to this meeting. We couldn't make the last one. We were both out of the country. And we could make this one. So we were told, yes?
Mr. Decker, if I may, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
I happen to be a lawyer, and you were represented by counsel. The procedures for an administrative hearing are uniform across the state of New York with regard to any public benefit corporation. So I submit respectfully to you, sir, if your counsel was, in quotes, unaware of the procedures, these are procedures that have been in our state in memoriam. And respectfully, sir, for 9 months your counsel seemed to know the system quite well. And as our executive director has said, now is the time to face the board with regard to your permit and your violation of the rules with regard to it. If you, Mr. Hudson, and your counsel later on resolve whatever is necessary that you wanted to
Lost you.
to say is, well, I get a little irritated, as the board knows, when people come in and their excuse is, well, we don't know the law. And especially when you're represented by counsel and said you're unaware of the law. That's not our responsibility.
I think we're confusing the law with what the appeal process is, because we just asked what is the first level of appeal,
Right.
and how does that work?
It's on the website.
The first level of appeal would normally be to have a conversation with Mr. Hodgkins. His determination is then appealed to Mr. Fulton, the chief engineer. Mr. Fulton's determination is brought before the executive director. the executive director renders a determination for staff
After holding a resolution.
after holding a resolution conference. And then at that point, should you elect to appeal to the board, it comes before this board in this manner. In this case, because the executive director had an opportunity early on to know that your attorney had contacted Mr. Hodgkin, the executive director asked me as counsel for the district to speak with your accountant. We quickly determined that an appeal to the board was the quickest and easiest way to resolve it.
Okay.
And therefore, that brought this matter here directly to the board.
Understood.
Truncating that process a little bit, making it simpler for you, simpler for staff. From this point, this is the first level of appeal.
Understood.
Your second level of appeal is to bring in Article 78. I think that's where you were going in your initial statement. After that, through the appellate courts for the state of New York.
Mm-hmm.
So that's
And
where we are in
it
this
is
process.
my intention to come to an amicable solution in the room full of ladies and gentlemen where we don't have to execute those further steps.
Right.
That is my intention today.
Let me just ask Stan, he asked a question that wasn't answered about separating the docks and, is that an answer? Right, restate your...
Right. May I go up to the board with the drawing in?
Sure.
Right now, we have a single supporting structure underneath, supporting 3 parallel sections of boardwalk. My question is, if we were to open these up, all the way open down to ground, much more in the character of a traditional boardwalk, where you have up, over, down, and there's open air from here all the way down to the ground, would that be acceptable?
You're saying,
Utilizing the same platform that you have everything on now?
Utilizing the same supporting structure that I currently have. So the decking would be gone, there would just be support structure there.
it would be the original 11 by 23 foot deck that's underneath
There would
supporting
be-
this would be gone.
No,
So the deck's still there.
the deck isn't, the
So what
support
we're doing
structure
is
is there.
moving the 4
We're opening these sections up,
to the deck.
all the way
to
down to the
original-
ground, all the way down to the ground.
To the original encroachment.
You're pulling the board up so you can see the. Is that what you're saying?
We're pulling boards up here that would open it up to the ground so that the walkways are completely separate walkways, not parallel walkways.
So you're gonna cut the deck that this is sitting on, you're gonna cut that deck also.
Yes,
So you're gonna have
But the joists going across would
will be
still be
remaining
there.
attached, that's correct.
It's still a 23-foot deck.
Well, I guess I'm asking the board, what is the differentiation between a deck and a support structure? To me, a deck has got a decking or platform on it. A support structure, whether it's made with joists and beams, and, in my case, I use 2 stumps. I got permission from the board to remove 2 rotten 110-foot pine trees. I removed them and used those stumps as 2 corner support structures for my structure. And it seems like that has rubbed the board wrong. I guess I would say it seems like from the beginning you said you can't use the stumps to support it. And I'm getting a little bit confused.
Let me stop you there. It didn't rub the board wrong. We knew nothing of it. That would have been staff.
Okay.
So.
Okay.
The supporting structure can be no larger than the structure itself.
Okay, but
So if you've got a 4-foot by 25-foot walkway,
right,
your support structure cannot exceed those
dimensions. So I would have to have a separate support structure for this walkway, and this walkway. They could not be one contiguous thing. Okay. If I take and I make all this go away, completely disappear. 4 feet wide, 8 by 8. Is that acceptable to you, sir?
Yes.
That would be an acceptable situation for me. It's acceptable to the powers to be. I will gladly make those modifications without bringing this any further up the food chain.
And everything that is supported by the 4x4 by 8 will be no larger, the support will be no larger than the actual width of the walkway and.
You'll be removing the rest of the supporting structure that isn't being utilized?
Yes.
Sounds like.
I think that's an effective resolution, but it needs to be memorialized in a formal work permit that shows that, as well as the non-renewal of your permit will be held until it's complete.
Okay.
And then, we'd like a time frame to when.
Well,
We'd like to work that out separately because of the weather factors and
Right.
considerations via a separate conversation with.
Right. It's going to be springtime when all the.
Right.
Yeah.
We understand that.
As soon as mud season's over in March,
Yeah.
I can get workers down there again, I can make things change.
Right. Basically,
Now, so I am still going to be allowed, though, to keep the one structural member between the 2 pine trees that are here and here. That's no problem with that. Fair enough.
So that's 23 feet.
that's a walkway.
It's a walkway.
It's a walkway.
It's a 4-foot walkway.
Four
In that
feet
area of the
wide.
lakes, in that area of the lake, the walkways are extensive because of
Actually,
the grade.
It's a 15-foot walkway with an 8 by 8 platform at the end of it.
Right.
Correct.
So that's acceptable to staff? Well, then it's obviously, as far as I'm concerned, it's acceptable to the board.
I had a feeling we could come to an agreement.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, the timeframe, I mean, we're looking for a revocation or non-renewal of the permit. It won't be renewed until the work permit is submitted and the work is done. That's your understanding, John? And until it's renewed, that means no other boats on the area, no float, no dock, right?
My floating dock has been stored on the beach for all the years without the permit.
I don't
Right.
think we need to go to that extreme.
Okay.
Myself, I think what we can do is, if he's willing to work with us and we can work with him and make this happen, there's no reason to move all that stuff.
Okay, then say
Something else
set
happens down the road where this doesn't happen in a,
set a May 15th
pardon?
deadline?
Why don't you, in your work permit, when you submit that, and once you talk to your contractor, give me a date.
Okay.
All right, but, within reason. I'm not looking at August or something like that, so, reasonable.
Okay.
And then
I would caution the board to make a more concrete date.
I think sometime in May.
I agree with John, that's the contractor right now.
Okay,
Have them put it in the work permit.
all right.
And that, again, is upon approval. Once we
Right.
review that date, we can say, no, that's too far out, please, so.
We can set a seasonal deadline in the springtime, which would imply no later than June 21st.
Yeah, that works for me.
That-
Board have any other comments?
Mr. Decker, does that work for you?
That's fair enough for me.
Okay.
Oh, good. I'm very happy we came to a settlement on this. Very good. Thank you for the presentation.
Okay.
Thank you for your.
Great.
Are you staying with us, Jeff, or?
I'm gonna end my participation. I've already filed more than I should, so. I'm glad it's a resolution. I'm not happy with the procedure, frankly.
Yeah.
They now box us in every time.
We have a solution, that's. Okay, we'll see you, sir. Have a good trip to Florida.
All right, good luck.
Happy New Year.
Okay, we move to the report of the executive director.
Good board members, thank you all. Big news, as you know, the U.S. Court of Appeals for the D.C. Circuit denied the petition of Erie Boulevard versus the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. The general counsel is going to go over it blow by blow sort of thing, but that's huge for us from a financial perspective going forward in terms of the Hudson River area.
Mr. You're welcome to stay for the meeting, it's a public meeting, but we're not insulted if you leave. I mean, should I leave, should I not leave, but
Yeah.
at your discretion completely.
Okay.
Sorry, go ahead.
Secondly, we have been working to reduce costs in the Hudson River area office. At the end of February, the current contract is up for 350 Northern Boulevard, and we've identified 2 other potential office spaces that cost much less for roughly halving the space that we have, sort of thing. So we're well on our way to that possibility. I attended the State of the State address when the governor delivered it last week. Very informative. The big takeaway from the state perspective is that there's a $4 billion budget gap that has to be closed. I'm watching very closely, particularly the state share for the Hudson and the Black River areas in terms of their funding for our operations. I've been staying very close to the Deputy Secretary for the Environment to be able to do that. We do have 2 budget administrative matters. Due to a potential lack of quorum in the March meeting, we would try to address those today. They're administrative things. One, from the Chief Fiscal Officer, is there's a report for the authority's budget office that's due. So we'd want to talk about that and get the board's sense that we can move forward with that routine administrative report. And then secondly, we, the senior staff, after this meeting, will be doing budget development at SFO. We want you to review the budget development schedule today and potentially adopt it if it's acceptable. It's a matter of putting it on the schedule instead of having it being formally approved in March, but allowing us to look for March, April, May, and into June when we need to adopt the budget, so we don't get behind time if we do indeed have a lack of a quorum. As you know, Tony Netto from Watertown was elected city judge. He's spoken to his administrative chain, if you will, for judges, and he thinks it's very likely, in fact, he will resign from the board. So we'll be down another board member from the Black River area. So I'll be working with the Office of Appointments to get right back with them to go ahead and get some other potential names and or speed up some of the potential nominees that are out there. And then we've mentioned that lastly for me, an executive session on personnel matters immediately following, with no requirement for the board to reconvene after that executive session. So I'll turn it over to the Chief Fiscal Officer to talk through the 2 issues about the report to the Authority's Budget Office and then our budget development schedule.
Thank you. Mr. Smolin. With regard to the budget and financial plan, the Public Authority Office requires, basically it's a forecast budget plan. The board has approved this historically in March because the report is due to be put and posted by the end of March. So obviously the April meeting would be too late. The report has, for as long as I've been developing and submitting the report, basically is just a landscape layout of the board's already completed independent audit, which the board was presented last month. It also includes an estimate of basically where we're at as far as this last fiscal year of the current 3-year cycle. And then the rest of it is just extrapolated forecast budgets going all the way out to 2022. Nothing on this report has anything to do with the development or approval of the upcoming 3-year budget. So these forecasted out years are just basically estimates. They don't, at the end of the day, represent a final approved budget of the board. So I'm just asking the board, in the event that we're not able to have a quorum in March, to give me the authority to complete this report as I have in the past 12 years and post it. The report will be presented to the board at the March meeting. But again, if there's not a quorum, the board would not be able to say, oh, go ahead and do it. And the ultimate posted report would be then brought to the April meeting, and the board could do whatever they wanted at that point. But I'm asking the board now to give me the authority to go ahead and complete this report.
Yeah, I don't see a problem with that. We need a motion for that?
Yeah, if you would make a motion.
Yeah.
We don't need a resolution, but a motion to authorize me to complete the 2019 budget and financial plan.
I'll make that motion.
Please, second.
Mr. DeWitt.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? We have talked about trying to conference everybody into notice the meeting to get a quorum.
That's correct. We're gonna work to do that.
I was actually going to bring that up in my report, that I will work with the current webcast vendor, Granicus, to walk us through the technical issues of, because we know we can get a place with Wi-Fi and a conference, and we can notice it. It's the technical, what we need to do to get it on the actual webcast itself. And that's something that I'm certain the vendor can explain to us, and we should be in a position to do that in March if we need to, and going forward. In any case, we'll work.
Very good. Did that conclude? Oh.
Just so the budget development schedule, which has essentially, basically, has been unchanged over the years that I've done 3-year budgets on. I think this is probably the third or fourth 3-year budget I've done. These dates are basically target dates, which is how I describe them. These dates can be moved any way the board feels we need to do to make sure that we address all of the important components of the budget. And at this point, we're already at January. So if staff we've already gotten together. We've determined some things that are mostly things that are already set in our statute, like the fact that we have federal, state assessments. We already have federal assessments which have already been established. So as far as the income stream goes, that income stream is already known. It's kind of a done deal. There are other things having to do with our current surplus that now we believe, based on this favorable court decision, we probably have now other options in terms of how we could use surplus, and has not been decided. So those are the kind of things that would be discussed during this development of the budget sequence of events. There's several finance committee meetings scheduled here, which again can be moved. We have March, April, May. We have 4 months, so clearly there will be a finance committee meeting that would precede the board's approval of the budget in June. So I think a lot of the stuff on here is really a refinement of the critical items on the budget, which a lot of it I think revolves around the maintenance plan. So this is the budget development schedule that the board has historically adopted to give us a guideline as how we get to June.
Okay.
And we've generally done that by motion.
What?
We've generally made a motion to adopt the schedule. And again, the
motion to accept this contract?
I'll make a motion.
Mr. DeWitt.
I'll second that.
Mr. Hayes.
Further discussion? All in favor? Opposed?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Do you have anything more to add to your report? Or
That's it, my report, subject to your question.
And I guess we're not spending any money this month.
No
There's no contracts to approve.
Not any new money.
Yeah.
Committee reports, General Counsel, Mr. Light.
So as Colonel Smallman indicated, September 25th, the 3-judge panel of the U.S. District Court for the D.C. Circuit, U.S. Court of Appeals for the D.C. Circuit, heard oral argument in the Erie Boulevard appeal of FERC's August 21st order calculating dates for the commencement of headwater benefits and FERC's November 19th, 2015 order on rehearing and dismissing a stay. On December 22nd, in a 3-0 decision, the court dismissed Erie's petition to vacate those orders. The court's opinion mirrored the arguments advanced in the regulating district's intervening brief by the Attorney General, finding that FERC correctly calculated the headwater benefits and then exercised equitable discretion to find that the 2006 settlement precluded Erie's prior state law-based assessment payments as credits against that headwater benefit assessment. Basically, I think you all understand what that means. We won, and we won big. The decision will pave the way for Erie's continued headwater benefits payments, and barring a successful petition to the U.S. Supreme Court, closes the case. It eliminates the potential for a refund or credit of nearly $3 million in principal and interest that Erie had claimed. There's a very minuscule chance that they will attempt to appeal it to the U.S. Supreme Court, and even smaller chance that the U.S. Supreme Court will entertain their petition.
Yeah, and 3-0 is what makes it unlikely.
3-0 makes it really hard. And there's no federal issue of widespread importance that the court is going to jump on and say that they have to decide. This isn't Roe v. Wade, but to us, it's a huge deal. Any questions about the decision, the process, where we are in it? Erie's has been making their headwater benefits payments all along. They've been looking for credits. They're not going to get them, and the matter's over. Everybody else has been making their payments and are precluded by statute or by prior court decisions. They're not going to get their refunds or credits either. So we're done. We won. I started this job in 2008 with 25 lawsuits against us. We now have none, barring appeal. So we're pretty happy about all of this. Another cool thing that happened is the leather stocking abstract and title company has finally given us draft title for the Brea land so that we can move forward with that project. We should be able to schedule a closing within the next several months, barring some other thing that we don't know, which should be plenty of time to start discussions with DEC and the Army Corps of Engineers over what they want us to do with the purported wetlands on the parcel that we're buying. There are some clouds in the title, in that title went from a person to somebody else, and that person's progeny likely delivered it to a third party who ultimately delivered it to the state, versus our chain of title, which takes it right up through the Black River Area Environmental Improvement Association, or their subsidiary that they created for the purpose of holding real estate. Ultimately, we can merge those two, the state's interests with the state's interests, or if it doesn't get that far, we still have the power of eminent domain. That said, we're probably not going to be able to bond through EFC for any of the projects that might go forward on that piece of property, because EFC is going to want a crystal clear title before they allow us to borrow $1 million to put some improvement.
We'll take care of that in the budget, so it's not going to bond for it.
Yeah, we're not likely to need to bond for it. I'm just making you aware that there's some foibles out there. It's not completely clear. Your next favorite thing is a note from the Joint Commission on Public Ethics saying that your financial disclosure forms for 2017 will be due May 15th of 2018. If anybody has any questions about how to make that filing and do so timely, let me know now. They'll let me know later. I think that is my complete report, unless anybody has any questions.
Oh, and a very good report, Mike said. Very good report. And again, thanks for all your efforts on this. I know it's been a long process. It's been a long process. Any other questions for Mr. Leslie? Compliance Officer, Mrs. Zicki.
Thank you. My report can be found on page 17. Our third quarter utilization report is due on the 15th. That's the Minority and Women Business program. Just for a little background, we get our percentage based on our total expenses for the quarter minus our exclusions and exemptions. That total figure divided by what we actually spend is where we get our percentage. For the third quarter, we have 12.8%. The same process is used for the Services Able to Veteran-Owned Business program. We had $1,227.24 spent with the veterans. Our MWBE and SCVOB Master Goal Plans are due this month. They both follow the same formula. It's an annual overview of our mission, procurement strategy, staffing, our budget detail, and how we plan to achieve this goal. They're both due on the 15th. And finally, please review the contract status reports on pages 18, 19, and 20. Their inclusion in your board packet satisfies the public authority law that requires an annual review and approval of those contracts. Do you have any questions? If not, that completes my report.
Any questions? Thank you. Chief Fiscal Officer, Mr. Ferraro.
Mr. Chairman, my report can be found on page 21 to 63. On 21, I'll focus on my district fiscal outlook highlights. Assessments for the Black River area. Unchanged, we've collected 906,000 in change of the 921,000 assessed. The amounts due are from 2 small hydro operators, which we expect to collect 14,434. In the Hudson River area, we are current with all state assessments and federal assessments we received, as Council pointed out, Erie Boulevard's annual federal assessment, also 2 other hydro operators have paid their assessments. I believe the total is 474,000 and change. So that's going to be a difference maker in the upcoming budget, where we'll be including that amount as a pre-assessment income, so the counties will certainly appreciate that. The only thing due that's not current on the Hudson River side is the Rensselaer County assessment. This being the last year of the consent agreement, they do not have to pay their assessment, I believe, until 29th of January. So that would only leave the 2 state shares for both the Hudson and the Black River, $1,250,000 respectively, Hudson Black, due to be paid sometime following passage of the budget. So anywhere between middle of April and middle of May is the time frame. So again, as I've been saying over the last probably 4 or 5 months, we're in very good shape. We're halfway through the last year of the budget, and look forward to developing the next 3-year budget.
Great.
One other thing, unless the board has any questions regarding that report, I do have travel report that needs to be approved by the board on page 64 for 2 board members totaling $733.95.
Okay, I need a motion to approve the expenses of Dave and Jeffrey.
I make that motion.
Mr. DeWitt?
I will second that.
Mr. Hayes?
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? didn't have a quorum vote on that. No.
Yes, we did.
Yeah.
Nobody abstained.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I just want to make one statement about how rosy that report is as opposed to when I first got on this board in 2008. With all the lawsuits and
So I don't get tired of repeating it. And I will probably for the next 18 months.
It is a complete 180. Thank you.
Next report, Chief Engineer, Mr. Paul Tam. Finally, we're hearing from you today.
Mr. Chairman. My report begins on page 65. Typical with a typical early winter and this time of the year. Certainly, reservoirs are really nothing. No operation is noteworthy. It's status quo. Reservoirs continue to be lowered in preparation for spring runoff. We did complete our first snow surveys, and we'll be adjusting as appropriate as we progress through the winter. Our larger reservoirs are within an inch or two of our target elevation, and everything is running very smoothly. Happy to take any questions if you have any.
I'm sorry, I thought I put it on silent. I apologize.
Thank you, Albert.
Put it on the phone and step on it.
I really thought I put it on silent. I apologize.
If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer.
When's the work scheduled for Old Forest and 6 Road? I get quizzed all the time.
It's greatly dependent upon how we proceed through the permitting process with the Army Corps of Engineers with regard to wetlands. Even if we were at a point where that could be easily resolved, I think it might be a little presumptuous to think that we could probably start this year.
I'm not asking you to presume.
By the time we got through finalizing construction drawings, got the bid documents out, I guess.
So 2019 would be
yeah.
possible.
I think at this point, especially with the issue that we have with regard to permitting for and through the Army Corps of Engineers, I think we're definitely looking at next summer before we'll be able to move forward.
Yeah, I just stopped a lot.
Yeah. That concludes my report then.
Administrator, Mr. Hudson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My report starts on page 95. Permit renewals went out January 3rd, and they're coming in batches, big time. So staff is busy processing those. Staff in the Hudson River area did a total of 1,492 feet of shoreline repair this year. And staff at the Black River Field office, when not removing or doing snow removal, have been working on completing the touches on the inside of the new garage. That's my report. I'll be glad to answer any questions anybody may have.
Any questions for Mr. Hodgson?
I have one, if you don't mind.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned in your report something about the valve valves, and you were checking the oil.
That's a normal process that we do.
What's the oil for?
Well,
Where's the oil?
There's oil in the operator
Okay.
that raises the stem up and down.
Got it.
And then there's oil in the 25 horsepower motors on each end during the bearings.
Okay. It just looked fun.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Any board member questions or comments? I have one quick one. I should have done this in the organizational meeting, but I have made 3 appointments for committee heads for the next year. Governance Committee, Mr. Rosenthal, Finance Committee, Mr. DeWitt, and Audit Committee, Mr. Brookstead. and those are our three standing committees.
So, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, that,
So the other members would,
yeah, let's see how we strip, you know.
because I'm not sure who the other members of those committees are, but I think that.
You know, we only have 4 board members.
Right.
So I'm kind of waiting to see what the state does, and then we'll appoint some members to the committee.
Okay.
I think we're okay with how he's defined.
Resolution for the next board meeting, which is March 13th in Utica. I need a motion to make that. Hopefully we'll have a quorum for that.
I'll make the motion.
Mr. Hay, Mr. Bergfeld.
I'll second that.
Mr. Dewitt.
Either one. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion to go into executive session to discuss personnel matters. And we will not be coming out with any resolution.
I don't think there are any further business.
Mr. Bergfeld made the
Motion.
first.
Executive session.
Second.
Mr. Dewitt.
Okay, we are all in favor? I'm sorry. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?